COSMOLOGY, available on Amazon and other places. But I made a video recently, and the point of that video was that the Bible does not teach that God told Noah to put all land animals on the ark. It says all, and I know some people just want to say all means all, but if you look closer at the context, even the word all, my friends, has a context. And if you, the sloppiest way to do it is, well, all means all, and that's as deep as I want to go. But there's such treasure in early Genesis. It so much points to Christ. It so much points to things that are astounding, like, okay, the whole Bible really does fit together so much better than I thought it did, if you just take the trouble to dig a little deeper. And that's what I want to do today. First of all, when we say all, we need to know who's saying all. Because if my wife sends me to the store for a certain kind of yogurt, and I come back and say, they're all gone, does that mean that yogurt cannot be found anywhere on the face of the earth? No, because that's a limited perspective. That's just my version. I couldn't find any of it. So all doesn't mean all in that case. Now, when God says all, it means all, except when he's talking about all of some smaller group. For instance, when he says, everything that has the breath of life shall perish, we don't think of him as taking whales, meaning whales, or meaning dolphins. Those weren't on the ark. And even the young earth creationists that believe in a global flood believe that. They don't think there were any whales or dolphins on the ark, because the context in which all animals with the breath of life perish was land animals. So there are some limitations, and there's more than you think once you really get into it. But so I've got the one video that shows that God didn't tell Noah to load as many land animals on the ark as the Jewish version or the young earth creation global flood version of it would think. But before we do that, let me say one thing about what is early Genesis. There are three main views, two of them are bigger than the other, about what early Genesis is. One is basically the secular scholars, who they have a fancy name for it, documentary hypothesis or whatever, but it basically saying it's a forgery. It was made by a bunch of priests centuries after Moses died. And they point to different inconsistencies in the text, like, okay, this sentence structure is different, this vocabulary is different, clearly this was not all written by the same person. So that's their view of it. The more fundamentalist view of it is, Moses maybe didn't even necessarily know anything about his family history. He didn't even know what was going to be in early Genesis, but he was in a tent and the Holy Spirit inspired him, and he wrote down what he was inspired to write. So that's the other view of it. And then there's another view that is kind of in the middle of that. It's called the tablet theory. Now the tablet theory explains totally all the critics that are saying that the Bible was not put together by Moses. It totally explains the differences in sentence structure, differences in the vocabulary, because Moses knew his family history. He did edit Genesis, he did put it together and write it. He had help. He had help from tablets that were heirlooms of his family that were written by some of the patriarchs in the Bible. And this is the tablet theory, and I explain it in the book. And it's the way I'm going to progress. So I'm assuming, and look it up on your own if you want to know more, but what I'm saying is there was a series of accounts that Moses compiled into Genesis. And this section is the account of Shem, Ham, and Japheth, Noah's sons. So when we're reading the flood account, chapter 6 and 7 and 8, God is not the narrator. The Holy Spirit is inspiring the people who wrote these accounts, but the narrator of the account are the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Now when they say God said something or the Lord said something, they're accurately recording what they said. But when the narrator is just describing things that are happening, that's not God speaking, that's them writing what they saw. Okay? So I'm starting with that. The other thing I want to start with is the cosmology that I'm laying out in this book and in this flood account is very, very Trinitarian. The traditional version, the Jewish global flood version, is not nearly as Trinitarian. It doesn't nearly point to Christ as much as what I'm going to say the text says. And I start with, and this is, well, again, this is in the book, so I'm not going to prove this here, but I'm just telling you what my assumptions are as I go through the text. The incarnation was not something that God had to come up with after his original plans didn't work out like he anticipated. Okay? It was something that happened in the beginning. Christ, who's now, the Bible teaches, seated at the right hand of the Father. So, but he came in bodily form in corruptible flesh, but before then, he was the fusion of God and man in the heavens. So in other words, there was a heavenly man. And and this is not at all, the way I'm going to explain this, it's not even that controversial. Many theologians see places in the Old Testament where God appears in a human form. A man wrestled with Jacob, Melchizedek, and the description given of him. When in the Tower of Babel account, the Lord came down to see the tower. He walked in the garden. In other words, there's an anthropogenic form of God, and when there is, it's always got this name attached to it, which is sometimes mispronounced, but I'll pronounce it like that, Yahweh. It's not quite pronounced like that, but I'll use this for the video. Translated the Lord in all caps in the King James Bible. That's the Tetragrammaton, it's the family name of God right there. And so it's a sacred name. And then the word translated God is Elohim, which is a plural, which also allows for a trinity, several persons. Well, we all believe this. Three that are Christians, Orthodox Christians. 3 persons, one God. 3 persons, one God. And so this Christ is in the Bible, the Old Testament, all along. These appearances by this anthropogenic being that are God and that sometimes do not seem to be all-knowing. You know, like Christ, he said, someone touched me and I felt power go out of me. Who did I heal? He didn't know. He told John, it's not even the Son knows the time something's going to happen. Only the Father knows. And so there must be something about when a person of the Godhead takes a bodily form. Maybe there are some limitations that are intrinsic to that. But this character often displays those same limitations. In other words, this is Christ. He was there all along. He's in the Bible all along. Okay? Not in Genesis chapter 1, because he doesn't step down and fuse with humanity until the end, near the end of chapter 1. But he starts showing up in chapter 2. He's the one who made the Adam and Eve and the more limited set of creatures in Genesis chapter 2. And so, in some places in the flood account, he's speaking. In some places, Elohim's speaking. And when it's the narrator, it's Shem, Ham, and Japheth speaking. And if you start there, if you understand who's actually saying all, you get the context for what all means. For example, the Lord says in chapter 6, verse 7, that he is going to destroy the man that he has made. He's going to destroy the beast that he has made. Now Elohim, which the Lord, of course, before he fused with humanity, he was a part of the Godhead, but Elohim is the Godhead. He made people, he made animals, and I did this in the last video, I showed the difference. He made a larger set of animals. He made all the animals there are, all the people there are, everything there is. And the Lord was an agent in that, but in chapter 2, the more limited set of animals, and Adam and Eve, that's got his name on it. That's his project in the earth. And really, it's all tied to the same thing. It's the line of Messiah to redeem creation. Here's creation. Now within creation, we're going to do another creation, smaller creation, that leads to the Messiah who will redeem that creation. And that's the whole plan. It's the gospel. It's laid out right there in early Genesis, if we can just see it. So when he says that he will destroy the man, and if you look at the Hebrew, it's not man, it's not just Adam, It's Ha-Adam, the man. In other words, it's the descendants of Adam. It's the Adamic race. Yes, that means destroy. But he's going to destroy not what? All that he made as Elohim in chapter 1? No. He's going to destroy all that he made in chapter 2. A more limited set of land animals related to domestication, as I explained in the previous video. Maybe not even all human beings, but the line of Adam and Eve, because it was basically like the tale of Victor Frankenstein and his monster, how Dr. Frankenstein created his life and he was so proud of it, but then it got out of hand and turned into a monster and he had to try to destroy what he created. That's kind of the same story that this is saying about the Adamites. They were made to make the world a better place, and instead they were contributing to its ruination. They were ruining the earth, so he was going to use the earth to ruin them. So, yes, all means all, but it's all of what he made in chapter 2, not what he made in chapter 1. Would you say, well, wait a minute, Mark. And this, by the way, this word muth, which is basically blot out, it is kill. It's same word. He consistently uses muth, 6:7 and 7:4. But Elohim in 6:13 and 6:17 consistently uses different terminology. Now it's unfortunate. It is translated the same. The word is translated destroy or die in English, even though there are different Hebrew words used. And this is confusing people. But we need to forget about the idea that, okay, we can just read this in English one time and go on. We can't do that. It was written thousands of years ago. It was written in a different language and a different culture. And honestly, God didn't say people who glance at the truth casually will find it. You've got to seek the truth. You've got to dig deeper. But there's a reward for doing so. And one of the rewards I love is that there was a story that people are throwing stones at the young earth creationist / Jewish version of this flood story. And there are places where you could throw stones at it, but basically they're just beating on a straw man. If you look at what it's really saying, it is very glorifying to Christ, and it is very plausible, and they don't have the same ammunition against this, what the account is really saying. So here we are in verse 6, in 6:13, Elohim is saying he's going to destroy it all. And when he says all, what does he mean? All. He created all. So when he says all, it does mean all. It's not like me going to the grocery store and I don't see the yogurt in my store. He can see if there's any yogurt in any store. Okay? But when the word used for die and destroy is this different word. And I want you to consider, it's different forms of the same word, Yegwa Gava, in both 6:13 and 6:17. So, what does he mean by destroy? Why is it a different word? What is he trying to say here that's different? It's simply this. Elohim sees the big picture. He sees that if the line leading to Messiah is cut off, then the hope to redeem the world, the hope to reconcile creation to God, is also ruined. And so this word reflects that. This word here just means blot out. It means what you think it does, die, be destroyed. This word is more like when you pluck a flower, it doesn't die right away. But it's going to ruin and go to perish, because by the act of what you've done, you've separated it from its source of life. And so it's inevitable that dying is going to follow. I'm going to give an example. Genesis 25, verse 8. Both these words are used in the same verse. It says that a certain patriarch gave up the ghost and died. Gave up the ghost is over here. Died is here. You see, this is not the same thing as dying, but it's something that leads to dying. Okay? And what Elohim is saying is, if he does this, if my son does this, and he blots out the Adamic race that he made, then it's going to lead the earth to ruin. It's going to lead the earth to corruption. There may even be animals around that live through a local flood. There may be people around that live through a local flood. But because they'll never be redeemed, they're dead already. They're going to die in their sins. They'll be eternally separated. They're going to go to ruin and corruption. And that's what this word means. It doesn't mean the same thing over here. Yes, the Adamites and the animals created in chapter 2 to help them transform the world. Yeah, he intends to blot them out. He is saying, the Father is saying, that's going to have consequences. Okay, it's going to have consequences for all. But those consequences are not, they will all be drowned in a flood. The consequences are that all of them will be cut off from me. That is the beauty is. This is the beauty of the gospel. It's saying, even in the flood account, we've got to keep the line to the Redeemer going. Now, as you move on from this part and you get past like chapter 7, verse 5 through 24, there is some language in there that if you don't understand who's talking, you would say, aha, this really is all. It's saying all different kinds of animals here, and it's saying that all the mountains were covered. But again, that's not God saying that. If God was saying the things in chapter 7, verses 5 through 24, if God was saying those things, and he was the narrator witnessing the account, then yes, that would mean a global flood. But this is Shem, Ham, and Japheth reporting what they saw. They saw all the land covered. They saw all the mountains covered. They saw all kinds of animals dead. All people dead. Okay? And I give plenty of evidence in the book that that's not the case. When they came out of the hills and found the plain in the land of Shinar, there were already other people there. But anyway, this is the context in which the Lord speaks and God speaks and Shem and Ham and Japheth speak. So what you see is it's not necessarily a global flood. It's not mandating a global flood. It's a flood that, yes, this is all going to be destroyed. This is all going to go to ruin. And from their perspective, that was everything. But it doesn't, it's not God saying those things. So, and all of it is pointing to Christ, because what happens is God makes a covenant with Noah. He says, I'm going to make a covenant with you. I'm going to use what's happening here to set up what I'm going to do in the future with a later covenant. And that is baptism. The flood in one of the epistles is compared to baptism. And think about what baptism is. Is baptism when the non-believers all get eradicated? Or is baptism when those of the Lord's people, they acknowledge the impurities in them that need to be submitted to God's judgment of the waters? See? In other words, what baptism says points much more to the model I'm describing than the model of a global flood in which everybody got wiped out and all the animals got wiped out. So that's the model. Again, the book is Early Genesis, the Revealed Cosmology. I do appreciate you listening, and may God bless you.